Coming up next, the Bookening reads Fahrenheit 451, the temperature that paper burns. Or actually, it's not the temperature that paper burns at all. It's some random number that a fireman gave to Ray Bradbury.
Or at least so he said.
Or so he said, yeah.
I wonder what temperature it does burn at.
I don't know. Welcome to the Bookening, everybody. I'm just looking up the temperature at which paper
kind of paper it is
burns. Yeah. The temperature at which paper burns. That's what I'm putting into Google here.
I see a bunch of Fahrenheit 451 references and no actual answers.
Well, Google, you know how Google just gives you answers. It says 451 degrees Fahrenheit. Ignition temperature is the temperature at which something catches fire and burns. The ignition temperature of paper is 451 degrees Fahrenheit or 233 degrees Celsius, which would seem to be what Mr. Bradbury said. But then we have an article here that says, does paper really burn at 451 degrees Fahrenheit? Fact checking the late Ray Bradbury. He just died when this article was written. Okay, it looks like basically the answer is complicated.
Yeah.
It
depends on the kind of paper and the...
So apparently, depending on where it is, it can be anywhere from the 440s to the low 450s. So it's basically right, but Bradbury went for the poetic, direct
451, very specific number.
And correctly so, by the way, because I don't know if this book is remembered if he didn't choose that title. I mean, basically, it's a good title. He was right.
Yeah, you can't call it Fahrenheit 440 to 451.
Yeah. Well, Joseph Heller
even.
Joseph Heller famously went back and forth on Catch 22. Was it going to be Catch 19? Was it going to be and then he decided on Catch 22, and again, right decision whether you like the book or not. Great decision, Catch 22. Wow. Hey everybody, by the way, you're probably wondering who we are or not. Maybe you've listened to all 91 episodes of this thing or whatever we're on. I think this might be 90 or 91. Coming up on the hundo, guys. Figure out what to do.
Yo.
Got to do something special. Interview Cormac McCarthy or Stephen Milhouse or something.
Yes.
I don't know.
Both at the same
alive,
time.
Right?
Yeah, we could
all three of them at the same time.
Yeah, we'll get them round table.
Let's do it.
McCarthy, Ishiguro.
They all probably listen, so...
Yeah, Milhouser.
Hey, guys.
Yeah, if you guys are listening, just hit us up on the DMs or whatever.
Yeah.
And
hashtag
us. Yeah.
What would the hashtag be?
Hashtag Bookening 100.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bookening 100.
Bookening 100. You can do it. Cormac.
Ishiguro.
Ishi.
We'll
call him Ishi.
Yeah.
All right, fellas. We still haven't introduced ourselves. I feel like I've fallen down on my job because that's my job, is to introduce us. And that's because I'm Nathan Alberson, your humble and obedient host, agent provocateur, a thing I like to say.
You know what else is a thing you like to say?
What's that?
A thing I like to say.
Yeah, I like to point out in a meta-textual kind of a way how I've decided to insert a new title for myself, Agent Provocateur. So, yeah, I'm nothing if not a man that follows certain formulas until I get tired of them and adopt new formulas. So
it works for you, though.
Yeah, it works for me. It works for me. I'm a great man.
Yes, and a great man is hard to find.
Exactly so.
A good man is hard to find.
Yeah,
a great man.
Let alone a great
impossible to find.
Yeah,
impossible.
Except he's right over there.
Yeah.
We found him.
Yeah, and the misfit right over there. It's
oh, yeah.
No, Brandon, you're not the misfit.
I think I might be.
You're the grandmother.
Easy.
No, you're not the grandmother.
You're the barbecue owner.
Is there a barbecue owner?
Oh, yeah. Get some sandwiches. His belly shakes like a sack of wheat or something like that. Sack of flour.
Yeah. Well, I myself, Nathan Alberson, your humble and obedient host, agent provocateur. Brandon over there, he is the baller. Nope. Scholar who's a baller of reading.
That's me.
He's wearing a plaid shirt. What do we consider that to be plaid? It's kind of a checkered shirt.
Striped. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
You call it a window pane.
Window pane.
Lots of window panes.
Yes. And there's Brandon. He's got the chiseled jaw, the black sweeping hair. He's a man. His wife thinks he's handsome.
My wife does, yep.
Anna Chastain, your thoughts?
Hashtag.
Bookening hundo.
He's not.
Yeah. And a man that Mrs. Menzel finds to be even more attractive. The pastor who's a master, in fact. Jacob Menzel, right over there. He's wearing a dotted shirt.
Yeah, dot print.
Dot print shirt.
Yeah.
Dot print shirt.
It's like a pointillist painting.
Pointillist painting.
Yes.
Dot print, baby, dot print. Yeah, it's Pastor Jacob Menzel. He's wearing the black or the brown boots, the jeans with the cuffs rolled up. Signature look for him, I think. that a signature look? Yeah, kind of a signature look. He's got the sleeves rolled up so you can see his arms. He's been working out every day doing his favorite exercise, the curl. He likes to do the curl.
Worst exercise ever.
Now, that's like an inside joke, folks. You wouldn't get it because you're not around when we talk about exercise.
But you could go listen to our episode of Sound of Sanity on exercise.
Yeah, you should listen to the one on male
Strength.
men. Yeah. The Stronger Sex, it's called, with the question mark. It's a good episode. And me, folks, you're probably, no one ever describes what I'm wearing. Jake, why don't you tell the people what I'm wearing?
You are wearing a blue button down.
Blue button
It's
down.
got a little bit of a sateen. It's got a little. It's got a sheen to it. It's got some texture, some very subtle striping going on. You got the khakis.
Mm-hmm.
Stylish glasses. I think
Stylish glasses. Too stylish.
Look at that.
What's that?
Today, my son Jack. You see it?
glasses, huh?
Hey,
Yeah.
man.
Whoa.
And apparently my daughter Alyssa is going to have to get glasses too.
Well,
They get headaches when they read, and this is why, because their eyes are slightly...
They're strained.
They're
strained.
short-sighted.
Yeah. And guess what? I get headaches often after I read, so I think they might have gotten the genetic malfunction from me,
Do you wear
which means that I probably should be wearing glasses. No. I've always prided myself on my vision, so I might actually need glasses.
When it comes to mental acuity, Brandon, you have your vision sees.
Yeah, just think how much more I could have read
Yeah.
if I'd only worn glasses.
Yep. Maybe you would have liked Ready Player One.
I don't think so.
Maybe you just couldn't understand it.
Rose-colored glasses, is that what we're talking about?
Oh,
Boom.
boom. You got him. All right, guys, let's do some donor shout-outs. Brandon, shout out Lily of the Valley.
Lily of the Valley.
Jake, shout out Andrew and Esther and little baby
Andrew and Esther,
Timothy,
the
the
lovebirds and little
lovebirds
baby
plus their
Timothy.
baby. Brandon, shout out the inscrutable Jenny Z. And of course, our favorite Jake, Robert and Rhonda, the lovebirds. And John and Jill and little baby
John and
Max.
Jill and little baby Max. The
plus little
lovebirds
baby
plus little baby
Max.
Max.
And Jake,
Yo,
do you find great literature to be transporting?
indeed I do.
Now,
That's why I use David's Mighty Men for all my transportation needs.
Beat you to the punch.
I like David's Mighty Men Transport because they support great podcasts like The Bookening. And, yeah, they're good for transportation. Hey, Brandon,
Hey,
my beloved mother Beth needs a shout out.
your beloved mother Beth needs a shout out.
So do it.
There it goes. Hey, Nathan's beloved mother Beth.
What about Jane Katie the Lovebirds?
Jake, any lovebirds or cold love cheese?
Yes.
He gotcha.
And, of course, our good friend Maya.
Maya.
And Benny and Dana T.
Benny and Anna T.
Nathan, not me.
Nathan, not Nathan.
Eric and Catherine the Lovebirds.
Eric and Catherine the Lovebirds.
And, of course, Professor and Mrs. X.
Professor and Mrs. X.
The Lovebirds.
The Lovebirds.
Hey, guds, let's talk about
You think they like
Fahrenheit-
cheese?
Yeah, they probably love cheese.
You think they're cold?
That's
Well, it's
Jane
Indiana
Katie.
Spring. They probably were.
Yeah,
Hey,
that's
guys.
right, Brandon.
But not if they burn books.
Oh, not if they burn books.
Then they
That's
would be
what I
hot.
do. Brandon likes to burn Fahrenheit 451.
I did at one point.
Did you do?
No, I never burnt it.
Oh. You know what I think?
What?
It's a pleasure to burn.
I do too. Actually, I like to barbecue.
Yeah.
So I like to burn things.
Brandon Chastain is a great barbecue artist, my friends. Hey, guys, listen to this. Montag falling flat, going down. Saw or felt or imagined he saw or felt the walls go dark in Millie's face, heard her screaming, because in the millionth part of time left, she saw her own face reflected there, in a mirror instead of a crystal ball, and it was such a wildly empty face, all by itself in the room, touching nothing, starved and eating of itself, that at last she recognized it as her own and looked quickly up at the ceiling as it and the entire structure of the hotel blasted down upon her, carrying her with 1,000,000 pounds of brick, metal, plaster, and wood to meet other people in the hives below, all on their quick way down to the cellar where the explosion rid itself of them in its own unreasonable way.
Nice.
That's a pretty sweet sentence, I thought.
That's a great sentence. What page is that on?
That is on page 152.
Yeah, and that summarizes the entire difference between the quality of this book and the quality of one Ready Player One.
Oh, really? Okay. Go on.
As you were reading that sentence to me, I was thinking when the trailer structure exploded, wouldn't it have been nice to have had a sentence of this vitality instead of what we got?
Yeah. Hundo P.
Yeah, in many ways, this has a lot of the issues that Ready Player One had, I guess, just to jump right in.
Yeah, sure. I'll jump right in.
But the quality of the literature is different.
Well, at the very least, I think we can say someone is trying.
Someone is trying.
In this book.
As someone might have argued.
Who argued what?
Oh, that you want someone to strive towards greatness, even if they fail.
Now, did he achieve greatness, though? That is the question. I think he did in that sentence. That sentence has always stuck with me.
It's a 12-line sentence.
I've always loved that sentence. That is a example of someone taking a risk and succeeding. It's a great sentence, great ending for a memorable little cartoon character. I don't know if she's a well-drawn character or not, but not really. But in terms of what he's doing with her, that's a great ending. She's sitting there watching in her imaginary world, feeding on the 3D television or whatever it is that they have in this universe, and then suddenly it goes out and she's just staring into the blackness, seeing her own face and seeing the emptiness, and that's in the millionth part of a second before the whole building collapses on her. That sentence, I think, is really, really cool. So that's definitely my favorite part of Fahrenheit 451. A great sentence, worth reading all the way to page 152 for, in my humble opinion.
I think it's a good opinion. And humble.
Well, guys, we might as well get to, oh my goodness, the planes are going over, just like in Fahrenheit 451. The bombers are always going over, the plane's going over.
No guns went off, though.
No. Listen to the first episode of Something Wicked. You'll get some good context there. Or listen to any of... we did one with Andrew Henry that's got some good... We've discussed Bradbury quite a bit. At length, that's right.
And you should go back and listen to the back catalog.
Yeah. Nothing better than the Bookening back catalog.
That's right.
A great catalog of stuff.
I guess the only thing worth noting is this is his first novel.
Yes.
It's early in
written on those famous typewriters at UCLA or wherever.
That's right, yeah. And we talked about that in the context, and I keep reminding myself that this is his first novel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's worth remembering.
When I remember the first things I wrote. Yeah.
Yeah, he would have been, like in his early 20s or something?
Yeah, he's young.
When he wrote this. Yeah, anyway, the planes just went over, and that means we have to do baggage, which I think we also probably mentioned our thoughts on this book before in those Bradbury episodes. But Jake, what baggage did you bring to this book?
I think I've only read this book once before. I don't remember reading it in high school. If it was assigned in high school, it would have been the kind of book I would have skipped. Back probably now 10-ish years ago, I would have been commuting a lot between Bloomington and Indianapolis, about an hour drive. And my wife would go to the public library for me and get me books on CD. And this was one of those books, and I really did not like it at all back then.
Do you remember why you didn't like it back then?
Well, yeah, it was just clunky and really on the nose and just badly written. The kind of book that hung around because it had a point to make, not because it had a good story to tell or a good way of making that point.
And that was your primary impression of Bradbury until earlier this year, or last year, I guess, we did Something Wicked, This Way Comes, correct?
That's right. And I think I may have said then, especially maybe I said this when we talked with Andrew Henry, I did remember reading and being moved by some of Bradbury's short stories in high school.
Yes.
But yeah, I really enjoyed Something Wicked, This Way Comes a whole lot.
Just a few months ago when we did it, yeah.
Yeah.
People can go back and listen to those episodes, but yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't know what I was going to get when I came to this book, but I did feel like I was coming maybe a little better prepared in terms of knowing what I was dealing with Bradbury. And also, I don't know, I think I came pretty open-minded, knowing just a little bit more about his style and understanding it better, for one. And two, also, I think recognizing the audiobook version of this that I listened to, I don't remember anything about it, but I know it's from the public library, so it's probably a fairly decent reading. But just knowing, having listened to a lot more audiobooks now, how much a reader can color your take on a book.
And I don't know that Bradbury in particular
he's not the author that you want an audiobook.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure that we'll get into this in the discussion. Like, the very places he's weak are the very places that are just going to make an audiobook make him sound that much more ridiculous.
I mean, I'm sure we will get into it more, but he's bad on dialogue, and just his writing style is very Baroque, overwrought. You could probably find someone that could do it justice really well, but it would have to be a very specific kind of a performance.
Well, even if he gave justice to a line like the 12-line sentence that you just read,
Mm-hmm.
there's not much you can do with the dialogue,
Yeah.
at least in certain points where it's just really wooden or stilted or wonky.
I would think that
unnatural.
the way to read this book would be to get somebody, I don't know who, like Stephen Wright, maybe. Somebody that,
a comedian.
well, that's a silly example, but someone to underplay it, just play it straight, because anyone that gives this book any energy is just going to make it seem kind of hyperbolic because it's already kind of on the edge of self-parody.
Well, it's trying.
Yeah.
It's trying. There are some books that are meant to be read aloud and you feel it and you almost want to read them aloud. We'll do one next month in Homer's Odyssey.
Mm-hmm.
We did one in Seamus Haney's Beowulf.
Mm-hmm.
But this is definitely just for the person who's sitting alone, reading quietly to themselves, and Bradbury's trying to do all the work for you.
Well, and also I just think because it's a book about books and it has all this stuff about how great books are and the binding of books and the smell of books, you kind of want to be reading it in a book and be smelling that smell and turning those pages and having that tactile experience, because it actually does detract maybe more for this book than many a book. It detracts to have it read to you because it's really a book about the mystic power of books.
Yeah, so I guess the long and short of it is I came to this reading as a Bradbury sympathizer, understanding more of his weaknesses and his strengths, but having really not liked the book the first go around.
Well, we'll come back and find out how your feelings changed or perhaps didn't change. But Brandon, what baggage did you bring to this thing?
So, Speardanes and days gone by had courage and greatness.
They did.
Yeah, I had to get that out. Sorry. It was just like right there.
Yeah, no, there's no reason anyone should bring up Seamus Heaney without...
Yeah, I'm sure everybody was feeling the same way.
Demands being read aloud.
Demands it.
Yeah.
My baggage.
Yes, your baggage.
Yes, I had actually never read any Bradbury until I moved to Bloomington. A mutual friend of all of ours recommended this book very highly, and so I went and read it. Mm-hmm. And at that point in my life, this will be actually part of the narrative that we get in. Narrative. Yeah, whatever. This will be a part of the narrative. Mm-hmm. I'll just lean into that word.
Narrative.
The narrative.
Mm-hmm.
I hate that word. It's largely just because of its misuse. It's not like it's a bad word.
We've all got a personal narrative, Brandon. And
yeah, see, that's the problem right there. So what's another word I could use, Jake? Help me out. Story?
Story.
Yeah, the story.
Yeah, there you go.
That's part of my story, is I had never read Bradbury, came up here, mutual friend recommended it, I read it. Where I was at that point in my life, I was still much more snobbish than I am today, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. To people who have listened to the Ready Player One episodes, I used to be much more snobbish.
Yeah, this is like nice Brandon on Ready Player One.
Yeah, I'm fine with where I am now. I don't ever see myself coming to terms with Ready Player One. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm right.
So Fahrenheit 451.
Fahrenheit 451.
Or baggage or whatever.
Baggage.
Yes.
So
you were a young man.
I didn't care for it.
Yeah, you didn't care for it.
What I didn't care for was, like Jake said, the overwrought language, the story that didn't seem to work. It was just a parable without having much of a story to tell. Everybody knows where I came from. I don't need to drag up the old names we always drag up, but I love character. I love story. And neither of these things were a strong suit of Bradbury's. I loved good dialogue, and he's very, very weak in the dialogue. I'd say that's where he is weakest, is his dialogue. The Mechanical Hound really threw me off. I just thought that was really silly.
Yeah.
I wasn't buying into the world. Fast forward a few years, we read Something Wicked This Way Comes. I fall in love with Bradbury. I see really what is fantastic about him. He's very much Dickensian in what he does. Mm-hmm. And I'm sympathetic to Dickens. Right. And so where am I out now? I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, I guess we will. Let's keep the people in suspense here.
Yeah.
I have a somewhat similar trajectory. I remember my mom really loving Fahrenheit 451. I remember it being around the house a lot in a cheap old paperback version, and me being encouraged by various educators and parental figures and authority figures and people, hey, you should read this book. And anytime something like that happens, I'm enough of a rebel without a cause or whatever that I wasn't really, I assumed it would probably just be something dumb that I wouldn't like. Eventually, Something Wicked This Way Comes ended up at my house, and I read that, and I was like, oh, this is great. This is horror. This is awesome. It's a creepy carnival. It's my kind of thing. And then I went back and read a bunch of old Bradbury stories in a collection called The October Country, which I really think is a great collection to this day. Lots of creepy, spooky stories. There's one called The Jar, about a man that buys off of a carnival something in the jar, and we have to try and figure out what's in the jar. And then there's one called The Small Assassin, about a mom who has a baby, and then she decides that the baby is trying to kill her, and the baby's crawling around with a scalpel at the end or something like that. It's really over the top and fun and creepy, and no one will believe the mother and all that kind of good stuff. So I ended up liking the kind of pulpy side of Bradbury, and then I came back around and tried Fahrenheit 451 as a teenager, and I think I probably thought it was fine, but it was definitely my least favorite Bradbury, and I had a lot of the same problems with it that you guys are describing. There's just, especially the section, just at the very beginning, you get hit with all this weird stuff. The Clarice character is just like, ugh. I mean, just such a, what do they call them? Pixie manic dream girls or whatever, I think is what the internet likes to call these kinds of characters. Just the female, the crazy kind of carefree female that's going to solve all your problems as a male by being free of spirit and all that kind of stuff. That was obnoxious. I mean, not that I think I'm pretty famous for not being any kind of a feminist, but that's just bad writing for bad kind of wish fulfillment male writing that I don't like. The section where they're pumping out his wife's stomach, Mildred, and it's just like, the snake with the head of a badger in the dragon went down the cavern of her stomach, and it's just like the most pathetic style ever, and I remember really sneering at that whole section. And actually, I will say, Mr. Neil Gaiman or whatever wrote the introduction to our copy that we read for this reading, and he really helped, I think, because he talks about how this is a retro future written by someone in the 1950s, and he just points out how everything is kind of the way that someone in the 1950s would expect the future to be. So he still thinks of criminals, Ray Bradbury is still imagining criminals being chased by hounds. And so he comes up with, what's the sci-fi version of that? Oh, it's a mechanical hound, which makes a whole heck of a lot more sense when you think about it that way.
Yeah, I had the same, or the introduction beforehand too, and it really did soften me up, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I did not read the introduction.
You probably should have read the introduction. It actually does help.
I mean, it's just having Gaiman. I mean, it's nothing that if you stop to think about it,
sure,
right? But he just makes you stop and think about the fact that he's inventing a future based on what he knew from the 1950s.
Wow. So Mildred is a takeoff. She's a future. She's someone looking at the 1950s housewife type person and then thinking, what's that person going to be like in the future? Mildred suddenly makes a lot more sense that way. All the females make more sense that way. And
everything makes a lot more sense.
The mechanical hound, the way that his boss treats him, just everything.
Hey.
If you kind of filter it through a retro future kind of thing.
No spoilers, but I may be right on board with that.
Well, there you go. There you go. Well, hey, should we just spoiler it now?
Yeah, I like this book a lot better than I did the first time.
Okay.
Yeah, same.
Yeah,
I think it's two reasons. One, I was more sympathetic to his style because I had already read Something Wicked This Way Comes. Second reason, because of a lot of the stuff we've done in the Bookening. The Bookening has actually helped me this way.
Yeah.
I was much more sympathetic to this being his first novel and the struggles that must be for him. Yeah. Comparing it to something like The Dubliners and thinking about the success this was compared to The Dubliners. And I do think that there's a big difference in what the success is. So why this is successful. Why I would recommend, like my son Elliot, read this book over Dubliners.
You know, when I finished, I had the same thought of, I just don't have any real hesitations about my kids reading Bradbury and reading them from a pretty young age. As soon as he can handle keeping up with the language, with the vocabulary.
Yeah.
I just don't have any. He's a fun, engaging writer.
Yep.
And not a terrible moralist, as it turns out.
Well, this is the right up a young person's alley who's trying to, their tastes, when they're learning to love character, but mainly they're learning to love plot. And so why not have a plot that also is tied to some sort of thinking about an issue?
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
Because it's teaching them to at least engage with the plot as opposed to just, it's like what we were tiptoeing or trying to come to terms with in the trial episode. But you want a plot that either serves you or you want a plot that forces you to do something, right? And this is the sort of plot that forces you to at least do something.
Yeah.
Right? You have to think. If you're going to engage with this plot, you have to think. And I think that's why this book has become as popular as it was, because it's an easy book to teach.
Right.
You teach it to a bunch of students, you have a whole lot of things to say. And that's the perfect age for it. And so, I mean, I'll probably go home and I'll give this to Alyssa to read.
Yeah, it's a good book. I'm glad I read it as a kid. It's fun to think about the things, and it's nice that he makes them so clear. I mean, it really is just a parable, and maybe that's the best way to think about it.
And parables are often best told in a shorter format than a novel.
Yeah, he's straining here to make this
He started
work.
out with a short story called the firemen or the firefighter.
I think it was called the firemen maybe, but
something like that. And it does feel at times like, and we were talking about this beforehand, but it does feel at times like this may have actually been a better short story than a novel.
Well, I think
it's not a long novel. It's 150 pages.
Yeah. I would say, I don't know, maybe this is a snotty thing to say, but it seems to me the reason this book is held on in the popular imagination is because it's a tribute to the power of a great idea. Like this book has such a compelling hook that people will read it forever, but is it actually like a really great, well-written novel? No, not really.
Yeah, well, see, and that's what we talked about with Bradbury before, is that he's more of an ideas guy than he is a great writer.
Yeah.
And he's so excited to give you his idea that you just sort of want to buy in and are willing to forgive a whole lot because you want to know what his great idea is. It's a lot like, reminds me of what we talked about with Steinbeck sitting down at the feet of Grandpa John because he's really excited to tell you a story.
Yeah.
And Bradbury's always really excited to tell you a story. And you forgive, like when you're sitting down by the fireside with Grandpa John, who's a storyteller, you've got the magic of the darkness and the magic of the fire and the magic of the rocking chair and all this other stuff that helps you forgive the fact that Grandpa may not be speaking in complete sentences or whatever it is.
Yeah.
The same kind of, Bradbury's often able to cast a similar kind of spell. This is his first go at it, and he's not as successful as he is in other places. But
I think Something Wicked This Way Comes just really is where it
converges.
It all converges, yeah. His art and his maturity and his slap happy desire to just tell a story all kind of meet and
something kind of magical ends up happening.
It's a beautiful book. I love everything about that book. This book's not there, I'm afraid.
No.
And I know there's people that really love it that will be offended at us even being that critical of it. But
can I also just say that he also, in general, as an author, makes me think of Joe Bailey. Joe Bailey was a writer.
He's actually the father of our pastor, Tim Bailey, who you may know from other
principally
an
essayist, a magazine essayist and editor, who also wrote a number of short stories and parables, and one longish sort of parable called The Gospel Blimp that sold a lot of copies.
The writing's not good. The dialogue's pretty hokey, but the idea,
he had an idea.
Is really compelling.
They're from a similar era, and they're cut from a similar cloth.
Yeah, there's a certain kind of stolid, manly sort of 1950s morality at play in both those men, actually.
Yeah.
But even Bradbury, who's not a Christian as far as I know, there's just kind of a decent, what you associate with that era, just sort of, you know.
No, you're right, yeah. It's interesting. Parable is manliness.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about it, but...
At least making a point as manliness.
Yeah.
There's a certain lack of preciousness in both of them. I do think of it as a manful...
Yeah, Bradbury doesn't really care what you think. I mean, he's just having fun telling the story.
He's telling you his story.
And he thinks it's worthwhile.
He's not apologetic about it. Huh. He's not careful. You say he's generous. That's the word that you like to use for him. And I think that it's as much careless in a manfully plowing ahead and telling the story.
Not self-aware in the best sense of those words.
Not self-aware.
Not like so many people are self-conscious and they're just like, what will people think of me? And what will... Bradbury's just like...
And so self-aware as to be self-absorbed, and you see it reflected in the neat perfection of Hemingway or
Joyce.
Right. Yeah,
this is
the opposite of that.
So we've put people into camps before, and it's interesting because I'm automatically thinking like Chesterton would fall into this camp.
Sure. Or Dickens.
Dickens, definitely. You know who else falls into this camp would be Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Because when you read a Shakespeare play, there's nothing wilder and stranger in the whole world than reading a Shakespeare play.
Yeah.
He just so happened to have the genius to make it all come together.
Yeah.
But Bradbury and Shakespeare have similarities. As weird as it is to say that.
I would
say that Bradbury has more in common with Shakespeare than Joyce does.
Yeah, no, I think that's completely true. And Bradbury, what's that? Too bold?
I'm trying to not chafe at that.
Oh, I don't have any problem with it.
Just the command. No, I agree with the sentiment for sure, but command of language.
Command of language is where Bradbury was lacking, and Bradbury had to learn.
Well, and that's why we hate Joyce, because Joyce had more talent in his pinky than Bradbury ever had in his whole body in terms of just being
and no willingness to forget himself and just serve others and serve a story.
Exactly. That's why Joyce is so hateful. I mean, Joyce, there's no question that Joyce is a more talented man than Bradbury.
I mean, and that's not to say that careful craft can't be in that first category.
Sure.
I would actually say Seamus Heaney falls into that category, but he's very, very careful with his craft. That's just because he's very concerned about the weight of each word against each other and stuff like that. The difference would be T.S. Eliot would be more in the James Joyce, except in Possum's Book of Practical Cats.
Memory.
No, stop.
All alone in the moonlight.
I hate that. The point being, it's fun to see when an author comes out and is just... Actually, later Christian T.S. Eliot is very much that way. His plays and stuff are playful in a way that his earlier poetry's not.
Yeah, that's another knock against old Clive Staples, because he got more careful and he became better in some ways as he got older, but he also got weirder and
worse. Yeah,
worse. So,
and the stuff worth remembering with him is like the Narnia trilogy.
Yeah, kind of mid-career. But this is great. Whatever. Let's not talk about him.
Acoustic Dylan.
Yeah.
Acoustic Dylan. Yes.
Well, although newly plugged in Dylan is actually some of my favorite Dylan. So
sure,
like modern times.
But then there's Christian Dylan and post-Christian Dylan.
Yeah.
My favorite's always going to be early acoustic Dylan.
Yeah, probably.
That's what moves me the most. But well, so then to bring this back to Bradbury, that's what fascinated me about this book. I approached it expecting to still not like it, and I was actually I was charmed by him.
I was too.
I enjoyed it just on the level of evening right before bed read.
It's a good parable. What I would say is weak about it. Like the first time I read it, all that stuff, all the kind of metaphors and stuff really bugged me because I think I was just being a snob. But
that's what I suspected myself too, is that I was just much more of a snob.
Oh, well,
the first time.
I thought you couldn't just say tube. You had to say it was a snake winding it. Come on. But this time, none of that bothered me. Reclaiming and coming back to Something Wicked certainly helped with that too, realizing that I actually still loved something about this guy. I actually think the Bookening helped. I mean, not to pat ourselves on the back too much, but I think if I'd read this book before we started the Bookening, like the same year, I don't know whether I would have liked it. But having had to process through all these things like East of Eden and certain books with you guys, I think it's given me an appreciation for people who are imperfect.
Yeah.
In a way.
I think it's given me a right perspective of more sympathy to the author, more love of just story.
Yeah.
Still a real appreciation of high craft, but it has to have the right mixture, because if you just have high craft, you just have snobbishness. And I remember back when I was the kind of guy who would pretend to like Dubliners or pretend to really love The Wasteland. And, that's the guy who then turned to this and really didn't like it.
Yeah, I think what we found ourselves doing is really prioritizing story and characterization above style, and it's changed the way that I've read and looked at books, and in I think a healthy way.
Yeah, same here. I could still a good turn of phrase is like crack. I mean, it can still make me gleeful, and I never want that to change about myself.
Well, we're always going to say that the very best of the best authors are going to be the people who can bring that style and substance together, the story and the characterization together with tremendous style. We've spent our time knocking stylists who have nothing to say or crap to say down. That's all we've done on this show. And cutting a lot of slack to people who have a good story to tell and maybe really stink at telling it.
Well, man, I mean, Steinbeck is hammy as all get out in some places.
Well, Bradbury's the worst. Although we did cut Stoker some slack, and he's 1,000 times worse than...
The thing about Bradbury that's different than someone like Stoker, to defend him a little bit, I actually do, non-sarcastically, I don't know how it came off when I read that sentence when we started the podcast. I love that sentence. I like that Bradbury swings for the fences. He's capable of doing gems. He's got a much higher batting average in Something Wicked and some of his later work than he does here.
He's going to still hit a home run.
Yeah, he does hit home runs.
He's going to show he's got the ability to hit that long ball. He just strikes out more.
Yeah. And I just think, I bet you $1 million if you pointed out some of the flaws to Bradbury about this book,
he'd agree with you.
He'd just laugh and say, oh yeah, I was young. Okay, so we like this book. I will say, in terms of what I found myself not liking this time around, where it really fell short for me and where I think Bradbury improved a lot by the time he wrote, maybe 10, 12, 15 years later when he wrote Something Wicked, is the characterization is that what's actually bugs me about this book.
I don't think that there's anything you could say about the book that if you isolate it, that I would say I like it. I don't think there's one thing that you could pull out and say well, do you like this? Do you like this? Do you like
Yeah.
this? I would say no to everything that you said, and yet somehow I enjoyed reading it, and I'm okay with it as a book.
I mostly am too.
that
I would just
weird?
say, I don't think that that's weird. I think maybe this is a hackneyed way of talking about it, but you should kind of just have a natural storyteller who's just cheerfully pulling you through it with spit and polish and pure sort of storytelling moxie. He's just gonna, he pulls it off somehow because he actually does have that certain je ne sais quoi that
Yeah.
it's what people always say about Stephen King. He might not be good at anything, but he's good at making you turn those pages.
But there's something about him that's better than just someone who makes you turn the pages.
I think so.
Just like there's something better about King, because King and Bradbury are similar, and they're both better than Ernest Cline.
Yeah. Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
I turned those pages with Ernest Cline.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, as I turned the pages with Ernest Cline, and yet
For the book.
all my old arguments against Cline aside, I think without
What
a
was
nail it's on the ground right beside me.
I don't know. Is that a second nail?
Are you throwing these?
I'm not throwing anything, dude. Are there two?
Yeah. Are they fall?
I hope the church doesn't collapse on us.
That's bizarre. Maybe they were in this.
I don't think we're going to solve the mystery. I think we're just going to have to live in.
To have that exciting. That's like a Bradburian thing.
Yeah. All right. So if people are listening, nails apparated and dropped to the ground next to Brandon's chair.
Yeah.
Like, I think this is the beginning of a Bradbury story. Brandon's just going to have these random nails drop out of
It
the
is
ground.
something out of a weird, creepy.
Yeah. I don't know what to do about this, guys. I need to go home and think about this.
This is the second time something creepy is happening. It's the curse of the Bookening. What
There's
happened?
absolutely nothing that it could have fallen. It could have fallen out of the vent.
Yeah, we're under tiles right now.
We're under
and-
ceiling tiles, but the vent is far enough away from you that I can't see them landing where.
Well, and they didn't drop. I mean, we didn't see them exactly, but I got the sense that they just came from Brandon's shoulder height, hit the carpet.
The only explanation is somehow they were on me, and I just didn't realize it.
in a pocket or something
Yeah.
like that.
That's just got to be.
That's the answer. Sure. What were we talking about?
Oh, Jake was saying that everything about this book sucks, but it still kind of works. Point two.
But Ernest Cline is a page turner too. So what's the difference?
I don't know. Maturity, moral sense. Do we have to spend a lot of time on this?
No.
Bradbury's just better.
But there's
you,
definitely
You want to play the
somebody-
devil's advocate on this? You can for fun if you want. But I think there's a pretty clear
There are definitely people-
qualitative
yeah.
difference here.
If I'm playing the devil's advocate, I say they both entertain you and turn the pages, and they don't actually leave you with anything good. They don't have anything to say. Bradbury says books are great, and Ernest Cline says, okay.
There's the problem right there. What does Ernest Cline say?
Well, and I say a pox upon you, Devil. Bradbury loves something, and Ernest Cline, I know, Devil, you'll say Ernest Cline loves 80s pop culture, but come on. Bradbury actually has a real adult, mature love of something and understanding of how something in life works. And
Yes. And that's the point that it's hard to make with people, but I wholeheartedly embrace, is that there is a maturity to taste and a maturity to an understanding of just appreciating story and what literature is doing that you don't have with Cline, but you do have with Bradbury.
Well, you're a snob, Brandon.
Well, another
Well, that's the argument, but guess what? If that makes me a snob, if liking Fahrenheit 451 makes me a snob,
It's a very strange universe we live in, but
well, I think what Madeleine L'Engle would have done with this book. Think of the references to what The Tempest and Jesus and Buddha and
think of how she would then tell you what the references were and make sure you got how brilliant she would be, she was being, and make sure
there's
you...
none of that pretension in this book, and there's all kinds of opportunity for it. I was waiting for it.
This book doesn't really suck up to you or validate you. You don't end up... Bradbury himself actually said that this was not a book about government oppression or Big Brother. He said it was more about Little Sister, which I think was his way of saying this book is about how we all just don't want to read, how we all turn a blind eye. It's not about the big boogeyman. It's not 1984. It's not... He did not see it in line with the other great dystopian novels.
In terms of dystopian novels, it'd be more in line with
Brave New World.
Brave New World than it would be with 1984.
which, to be fair, I actually think this is better than Brave New World.
I've not read Brave New World.
I did, but it was high school, so I can't
I'm not
say.
a big fan of Brave New World.
It's sort of a cross, isn't it? If you're thinking of just human nature sorts of things, Orwell is the government is keeping you down. Brave New World is nobody cares.
Right.
Well, yeah.
And this is, we're all complicit in this conspiracy, and that is a more.
Yeah, and
I'm probably oversimplifying both of those books.
You're definitely oversimplifying, but it's fine. It's.
But the big
it's
speech,
the right way of
is it
oversimplifying.
Beatty or Beatty?
Who? Beatty? Yeah,
Beatty.
The chief. He's the most interesting character. I
Well,
think.
the whole scene where he comes to visit gives the history of
Is able to pull
firefighters.
up those random quotes.
Yeah,
I think Beatty-
he's fascinating, but
Yeah.
2 points there. One, you can always tell where Bradbury is invested with his philosophy because he gives those speeches to people,
Yeah.
and the speeches work as far as dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking of Charles and
Yeah.
his speech, and then Beatty's speech here. It works. It's interesting. It's engaging.
Yeah.
But his point is what you were saying, that
I don't know
people-
that anyone actually talks that way. But
No,
yes,
but still, it's
fun
fascinating to read.
Yeah.
It's like an essay.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what the HBO series does with that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But to the point that, we've all are complicit in it. We want the entertainment, and so we would rather see what's the new Jurassic Park movie.
Jurassic Park Fallen World.
Yeah,
Fallen Kingdom.
We
Fallen
would rather
Kingdom,
rather get excited about Jurassic Park Fallen Kingdom than reading. I'll go back to my old fallback, War and Peace.
It's good old Tolstoy. Yeah.
Right. And so that's his point here, is that we give ourselves to those things, so we become complicit in our own destruction. It's interesting then that he also says the things that we get to keep are the sex books and comic books.
Yeah. Well, I think he's got, maybe when you start comparing him to all the other quote unquote great dystopian people, 1984, Brave New World, whatever, what's interesting about Bradbury, I think, and what lends him an additional air of credibility and perhaps of maturity is I think he's got hope. I mean, even his worst characters, Beatty, the fire chief, we get a weird kind of, we don't know whether he's not just a secret reader and just suicidal at the end.
Right.
The wife, as dumb, given over as to entertainment as she is, he gives her that beautiful sentence that I read at the end, where in the millisecond before she dies, she sees the emptiness of her life and is horrified by it. And I find that to be very moving.
When you come to the commune of hobos who are living books or whatever, you have almost this sort of like view of things, that things are terrible, but things run their course and we're moving forward ultimately.
And actually, things might get better quickly because the bad dystopian city gets blown all to hell.
And we're here and we've got the books and we've got the knowledge and we can build on what came before us.
And in
still.
the depressing dystopian novel, they walk away from the city. In this novel, they walk towards the city. We're going to help out. We're going to do what we can to share with people, to share our knowledge, to rebuild civilization. I mean, it's a pretty hopeful ending.
I
For
think
us.
he really does have hope. He does have a sort of onward and upward.
And that was the same thing that we've all responded to, I think, about as cheesy as it could be even there. And Something Wicked This Way Comes. Sometimes
Death by love.
Death by love.
hugging.
Yeah. Sometimes you just got to hug a bad guy to death,
Yeah.
I don't know what else is there to say about this. Like I was saying, I had trouble with just not so much the broad characterization. Like Beatty was an interest. All the characters were interesting, and I liked where they landed. But just Raymond Chandler early on said he had trouble keeping characters alive when they were in a room. Like he said, I can't keep more than 2 people alive in a room just because I'm a young, immature writer. And that's kind of how I felt about Bradbury. Like he just has trouble with keeping all the plates spinning in terms of like how would 3 people in a room behave.
That's interesting.
There's just some kind of cheap, like the scene where Mildred is discovering the book under his pillow. It's just like feels like something that a high schooler would write, where they think this is how human beings would react. It's like no one would. You're all behaving like weird automatons here. All 3 characters are. I get the bigger picture of how, Beatty doesn't want to see and the wife is whatever and Montag, it all kind of makes sense on a philosophical level, but then on just like do human beings actually do these actions level? It doesn't
actually work.
Yeah, it doesn't quite work.
He's immature.
Yeah.
And I think I keep coming back to he was immature, so I'm willing to forgive him some. But I never thought about that before. That's interesting. About an author's ability to keep characters alive in a room together.
Yeah.
Think about how masterful Austen and Tolstoy.
Well, Tolstoy especially. Tolstoy can do those big party scenes.
You can have
like
a big
nobody.
ball.
Yeah.
The opening to War and Peace is a big soiree party where Pierre comes into this party, and it's just like you get introduced to 20 characters. characters, and they all seem alive, and he seems to know where everybody is and how they're going to interact. It's
Well, he actually describes in that scene, he describes a hostess, and he says her ability as a hostess was such that she would go from person to person, and like a plate spinner, she would spin a plate here and spin a plate there, and she kept all the plates spinning relationally. I think Tolstoy is actually describing himself there. That's what he does. He knows how to keep all the plates spinning in a scene. And if you've ever tried to write, or if you've ever read bad writing by a high schooler in particular, or by my bad writing in high school, it's hard to do. It's hard to just keep 2 characters or 3 characters alive. Why isn't this guy talking? Well, he must be lighting a cigarette. You'll see immature writers come up with all kinds of things. It's actually much harder. Writing's hard. That's, I guess, all I'm trying to say. I don't know.
It is a difficult craft. And
not everybody's E.B. White.
No. And to be fair, E.B. White waited until he was a bit older to write his first novels. And his first one's about a mouse who only ever talks to one other person, really.
And is born of a woman, I guess?
That changes.
That changed in the
draft. I think Jake made the point.
Yeah. He followed the advice and edited that.
Though, the barn seems alive in Charlotte's Web. Yeah. So he does learn to master that craft, too.
Yeah, you feel like the sheep and everybody just, Yeah. Jake, would you give the BSOA to Fahrenheit 451?
Qualified. My qualification would be there are lots and lots and lots of other books that are more worth your time.
Including by Mr. Raymond Bradbury himself, I would say.
Yeah. I'm more inclined to give this book a pass than I am a seal of approval.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I don't love it. I don't know. I'll ask Brandon first. Brandon?
I'll give it a qualified seal of approval.
Qualified seal of approval.
Because I'm thinking, for a young person to read this book and to have the excitement at the end of...
what I just think about Bradbury is that we've talked off and on, and we talked in our Charlotte's Web stuff about the idea of young adult fiction and that hitting that 12 to 14 range or whatever. But I really think of Bradbury as really great young adult fiction. Like when I read this book, I thought, oh yeah, in a year or two, I'll be excited to give this book to Peter, even though I don't think it's the greatest book ever. Like, I think Bradbury's just good because he's imaginative and he's
colorful
and he's vivid. He's a great storyteller. He's exciting. He's got good ideas. The ideas are challenging, and they're not challenging if you've hit these tropes before. But when I think of where do I want my kids to first encounter these kinds of tropes, I don't know they could do better than Bradbury.
Yeah.
And so I just I think of, he's kind of a great young adult writer.
Yeah. If you really like stories that are more parable driven than character driven and stuff like that, then this is good. And I think for young people who are learning fiction, this is a great place to start because it's kind of all on the table. It's very clear. The characters are one-dimensional, but at least he has characters. It has a point to the story, which is better than a lot of the crap.
And only one point, and I think that may be part of it, is like in everything by Bradbury, he's got one idea and one point, and there's not the sophistication. Like for somebody who is growing into the idea that stories have a point,
and out of fairy tale and stuff.
Out of fairy tales into stories having a point, this sort of parable, I have one big idea and one big point, is a really nice stepping stone, to my mind, on the way to the much more complex stories. And not that I want to hold back somebody who's 12 or 14 who can handle Austen or Dickens or whatever from Austen or Dickens or Twain or whoever else.
I loved these books when I loved all of Ray Bradbury when I was about 14, and I wouldn't begrudge any 14. If I had a 14-year-old kid, I would give them Ray Bradbury and unqualified seal of approval for them, at least, I think.
Yeah, I can see this this is a good stepping stone for Dickens.
And that's
then a good stepping stone for Austen and Tolstoy.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's probably why I sneered at this book when I was 22 or whatever reading it.
Because you were immature and weren't okay with something being not for you.
Yeah, exactly. I wasn't okay with how simple and simplistic it was. I wanted something meatier and whatever, and it felt immature. But I think I can look now and say, well, maybe I was just the immature one.
This might be a nasty thought, but what I abominate is the idea that because something, how to say this right? Here's the thing. There's a certain kind of reader who, because they had a great time riding their tricycle, they want to pretend like a tricycle is the ultimate mode of transportation. for the rest of their life. And they will just tell, and if you try to say, hey, why not try a bike? Why not try a motorcycle? Why not take an airplane? They'll say, no, a tricycle. Tricycles are great. And it's like, no, part of maturity is growing out of things. And I just abominate the idea that, and this is why I think I've had a chip on my shoulder about this book. And I'm glad that we've all sort of matured out of having to have a chip on it. And I don't want to. It's a good book, basically. But it is a book for a younger kind of a person. It is an immature book in certain ways.
It's just a tricycle.
It's just a
Tricycles
tricycle.
are good for what tricycles are good for, which is a stepping stone for a toddler.
And the people that are listening to this podcast, I know they're out there, and I don't want to lose supporters or anything, but there's people that will listen to this and be offended that we didn't just, put it on the same pane with Shakespeare. And it's like, no, Shakespeare built automobiles. This is a tricycle. And that's okay. It's okay for things to be tricycles.
It's a fantastic tricycle.
It's a great tricycle. It's the tricycle. It's a tricycle among tricycles.
It's the Daisy BB gun of tricycles.
It's a golden tricycle.
All kinds of, all the metaphors, man.
Let's do it.
Let's make this as Bradbury-esque as we can.
It was a pleasure to ride this tricycle.
But eventually it's got to be a pleasure to watch it burn.
Wait, no, that's wrong. That's wrong. That's what we thought a couple of years ago.
You need a fireman.
No, it's got to be a pleasure to watch your children learn to love it while you go and love better things. And that's that is, I keep stressing this point because I see it happen all the time. This is really where it gets offensive and difficult, because you're talking about maturity with art and entertainment, I think, and it has especially to do with America, with our equality ideas. People don't want to think that your tastes and your opinions about art are the same as your opinions about like morals and ethics, that they should grow up.
Yeah.
But they should. There should be a time when you grow out of, like, hopefully Bradbury is a step out of you liking Ernest Cline.
Yeah.
Right, Ernest? Because Bradbury shows you, which of you made the point that, I think it was you, that Bradbury actually has a point. That's what just silenced the devil completely, right?
Well, I think the devil actually...
The devil made the point himself.
Made the point himself on accident.
Oops.
The devil thought he could BS a point from Ready Player One, and he came up empty-handed.
He's just like, wait a second.
He just proved the point that there is a maturing that happens. But you got to imagine that there's a maturing that happens after Bradbury too. Right. And the maturing is you step out of Bradbury and then you read David Copperfield. Mm-hmm. Then you read David Copperfield and then you say, well, that's great. You read Huckleberry Finn, and then you're like, wow, that's fantastic. And then you read Austen and Tolstoy and Shakespeare.
Right. Well, I mean, look, as parents, you guys want your children to outgrow you. You want them to reach the point where they don't need you, and you will be sad when that happens. But that's what you want. And I think Ray Bradbury he seems like a humble, cool guy. He seems to me, and I could be reading into this, he seems like the kind of guy that would be happy for someone to outgrow Ray Bradbury and to discover Shakespeare or Tolstoy or whatever it is, because he loves those things and knows that they're great. Yeah. And he knows he's a stepping stone in some sense.
Yeah. And the point that
I don't know whether that's true or not, but I think it's the right way to think of. I don't know whether he'd think about himself that way or not, but I think it's the right way to think of him.
But there are people that go the wrong trajectory. Well, they'll prize only the point that's being made, and so then they'll end up liking Dostoevsky.
Yuck.
Yeah. Who is just about the philosophy, and that's the pride of mind. A lot of philosophers end up liking Nietzsche, Dostoevsky, those guys, because for some reason they think Socrates is fun to read.
Right.
Yuck.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that when we get to Homer.
Yuck. Dostoevsky is just Kierkegaard.
Yeah, he's just Kierkegaard. Yeah. Or Kierkegaard. That's right. As you guys.
I had a professor.
Yeah.
I didn't. I mispronounce things all the time.
Yeah. I think most people probably say Kierkegaard, though.
I'm just going to honor my professor and stick to...
I 100% believe you're right, and I 100% believe you'll never not get a funny look from anyone who's not your professor.
I know, but I'm just going to... Yeah. He was an amazing professor.
Well, but yeah, you should definitely keep saying Kierkegaard. I'm happy.
Paul Eisenberg.
Shout out to good teachers.
Eisenbohr.
Eisenbohr.
That's how I say it.
But I was thinking about it the other day. Have you ever read Plato and Socrates?
Yeah, I've read some Plato and Socrates.
I think so. What happens?
Socrates, can you?
No, you read Plato. You read
yeah.
Socrates through Plato. So one thing I drive a lot, and so I think what happens is as you mature, you look back with maturity on the things you've read. Mm-hmm. And so one thing that I came from a classical background. I think I should probably make that clear so people know that when I'm talking against classical stuff.
There's never anything on the
When
Bookening.
Nathan talks about homeschooling, you have to know that he was a homeschooler. When Brandon talks about classically educated people, you have to know that Brandon was classically educated. You everybody have to know that. If you think that we're just a bunch of
there's never anything on the Bookening we've made fun of or been snobby towards.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
In fact,
of course, I'm a public school kid.
So you can talk about that. So for everybody who...
I'm not the one who takes to the shots at homeschoolers or classically educated
so
people,
this isn't personal agenda against anyone. So for anyone who might have the classical background, just let me tell you, I went to a classical school. I went to a classical high school in the basement of a lawyer in Fort Worth where we were privately tutored by a Catholic graduate student who was writing his dissertation. There was only 7 of us, where he would teach us all day long in the basement of this lawyer in Fort Worth the works of Socrates, all the great Greek playwrights and Roman playwrights. I mean, I got like the classical education. I got classical education before it was classical education.
All right, yeah.
So those are my credentials. So anyways, but I go back and now I think about the fact that he would stand up there and he would try to convince us that Plato was great. And now, as I look back with more maturity on it, I realize that it's kind of overrated. And Plato was a pervert who just tried to convince everybody, like C.S. Lewis, that pederasty was fine. And so, as you mature, so will your tastes, believe it or not. Yeah. And so you will actually become more mature in what you love. And you will realize that as great as Bradbury is, there are better things to come.
And it's okay to die to a thing. It's okay for a thing to be good enough to hold you in thrall for a few years and then for it to go away. It doesn't make Bradbury lesser because he can't serve you for your whole life the way that he did when you were 14. No. It's called life. Things are finite. Everything's going to burn eventually, and then you'll stand before God. I mean, not to be too over the top about it, but there's a shelf life on everything. So once you just make your peace with that, then you'll be a happier person.
Don't over prioritize nostalgia. Sometimes poo has to die. And you have to go off and the little balloon spiders fly away. But hey, more balloon spiders take their place. So
that's a good ending line, probably. Hey, everybody. The Bookening was written by, I'm just going to give credit to everybody because I think this was a good episode, maybe. Jacob Menzel, Brandon Chasteen, and Nathan Alberson. That's reverse alphabetical order right there. Produced by Nathan Alberson, executive produced by Jacob Menzel, blah, 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 blah. You can go to patreon.com/The Bookening and support us, right, Jake?
Oh, yeah.
What level of support do you think that people should sign up for, Jacob?
Well, we've got nobody at the $100 a month support level, but if you sign up for $100 a month, you just get to pick a book.
Yeah.
Any book for us to review.
Not the 50 Shades.
You pretty much help us get to our next level, too.
Yeah.
$4, even $1 a month. Every little bit helps. And you get access to great behind-the-scenes content for as little as $1 a month. Weekly video where we do a pre-show like we did today.
Yeah.
We're really good about doing that before the thing. And, like we aired this past week.
Yep.
Okay, sometimes we fail.
Well, we aired one this week. Look, we're not perfect.
See it.
We're not perfect, folks. I know the Mysterious Phantom promised a show behind the paywall, and that still hasn't happened, but it will.
It's gonna happen.
It's gonna happen.
Mysterious Phantom's gonna have a show behind the paywall soon. I tell you what, y'all get us up to $500 a month. And the Mysterious, I will personally guarantee if the Phantom that hasn't had a show behind the paywall, by the time we hit $500 a month, we hit $500 a month, the Phantom will have a behind the paywall show.
I think that's fair.
And we only have $120 a month to go, guys.
I've never met this Phantom before, but I think we could probably twist his arm or something.
I personally guarantee you get us up to $500 a month, we will make it happen. I think the funnest thing about the sort of pre-show that gets aired is you get to see all of Brandon's massive stack of books and things and notes that he brings for his contextual Texan
Brandon
segment.
Doesn't just he's no slouch, man. He comes prepared.
Well, recently he just reads the author's entire
oeuvre.
Yeah, I'm
Right.
becoming more
Yeah.
obsessive with this, but hey,
Yeah.
I've enjoyed it.
No, you're a
Well,
good man.
I've enjoyed it.
We've enjoyed you doing it. Yeah, the public's enjoyed it.
The other thing
Brandon.
you get are some pretty unfiltered takes on,
yeah. If you want to know what we really think, then
or what we're thinking or processing about books that we're reading and we've not recorded yet.
yeah. Or if you just want to hear like what kind of spanking we think Charles Wallace should have gotten, you can hear
Very
all about
brutal.
it.
Oh, you just spoiled it, man.
Oh,
Now
sorry.
they're not going to sign up
Yeah.
to hear
Okay.
about
I'm
it.
sorry. No, with a feather, maybe. We don't know. You don't know.
Perhaps.
Or with a feather.
Or a hammer.
Or a, wow. Not that not even for Charles Wallace. Was
Brennan wants to take him into that little torture chamber.
The torture chamber, yeah. All right. Good night, Brandon.
Good night, Nathan.
Good night, Moon. Good night, Jake.
Good night, Nathan.
Good night, Nathan. Good night, Nathan.